It's one of the few films which is also philosophical. It was an accurate representation of what the future could be. I'm a science journalist who used to be editor of I'm a former editor of Science Today, and I've been writing on futuristics for, well, as long as I can remember. Science fiction is future studies. I think it's another term for future studies, only done much better. Star Trek, for instance, almost everything which was shown in Star Trek from 1967, when it first started, is either being implemented or they're trying their darndest to implement it. So, I mean, there's a huge gray area between the two of them. They're even trying to do a tractor drive now. I mean, who thought of tractor drive? Who thought of energy field? Who thought of warp drives? One reason or the one barrier that we have to space exploration is the speed of light. So that even the closest star will take 4 years at the speed of light. But if you have something like a warp drive, which basically is nothing but what Einstein had said about there being a tunnel. Einstein rows in tunnels, I think they were called. Using that would mean you could connect two parts of the universe instantaneously. So that's something that should be investigated robustly. Definitely 2001 Space Odyssey comes to mind because it was shot in 1966 and it showed a device almost accurately, as accurately as possible, a device like the iPad. I don't know if you remember seeing that, but he's using that. It's lying in front of him, and actually you can't make out the difference between an iPad and that device that he's using. I mean, how precise was that? Solaris, it was not so much of an interesting prediction about the future, but what could be the nature of the future. That, sometimes you think that you sort of wonder what you're going to see when you explore other worlds, and sometimes we try to limit our imagination to what we see here and at the most extrapolate from that. But in Solaris, the whole planet was alive. Or any of the novels of Stanislaw Lem. Now, that is some science fiction writer. I mean, he's leagues, light miles, or light years ahead of who we normally consider to be the normal science fiction writers. He thought of nanomachines in which he had tiny little metal insects that came together and formed a swarm intelligence. And this was when? This was before, I think, many years before that the word nano became sort of mainstream. The only good Indian science fiction I know is Satyajit Ray. He was the only one I know who actually came up with good science fiction ideas. I mean, there was one story of his, I remember, or one idea of his, in which he said that the people in a remote village of Bengal who used to worship a half-submerged temple in a local lake, in which just the steeple of the temple could be seen. But later it turned out that the steeple was actually part of the nose cone of a rocket, which had landed there million eons ago. Because it's one of the few films which is also philosophical. It showed, among other things, it was an accurate representation of what the future could be, which it didn't turn out to be at all. I mean, 2001, Space Odyssey, we didn't go to the moon. But the accuracy of details and the extrapolations from the present into the future were painstakingly done. Something like Minority Report also, you know, where touch screens and all that, we used to see it on Minority Report and go who and ah and say, wow, can we ever have screens like that? Now all our smartphones have screens like that. 2001 Space Odyssey has not dated. You can carry on seeing it. It seems like it was made the other day. Even the Jupiter and Beyond sequence, the last sequence, that is done without digitalization. With digital technology, I can do it on my PC. This guy was doing it with oils and matrix and pop art paintings and parallel photography. And I don't know if you remember that sequence where he's trying to land on a very surreal surface of Jupiter. It makes it, to me, it made a lot of philosophical sense more than just science fiction sense. And philosophical sense is ultimately what we want to know about why we are here and what is the universe about and what we are about, I guess. Contact, definitely. Uh, Contact first with life forms and then with intelligences. I mean, like prior to 1997, we used to think that there aren't any other solar systems in the like forget universe in our galaxy. So forget planets. Then we started discovering planets. Today we have over 3,000 that we've discovered, which are extrasolar. Now, that's only in our galaxy. In our galaxy is 100 billion suns. If one in 10 has about 2 or 3 planets, I mean, those are billions of planets we're talking about. I mean, it will be sheer arrogance to think that nowhere else could life, therefore evolution, and therefore intelligence could have developed. We could say he's wrong that we haven't found a monolith on the moon. Okay, right. But that's the fictive element in the film.
Yeah.
We haven't even gone back to the moon till 2001. Fine. We didn't have the technology to go to Jupiter in 2001. Fine. But we didn't have the iPad in 2001 either. The iPad is a tenable construct, future construct. So we don't know whether the other thing that he's talking about there are tenable or not. It's not about whether he was wrong by a margin of 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, but he was not wrong about the margin of thinking. So he wasn't out to show gadgetry as much as accurate representation of what the future might be, besides just typical science fiction futures, which sometimes tend to become so retro almost. You look at it and say, this is all you could think of. So that way, I feel the question should be turned around to ask that is it a better representation of the future or not? That way, I would say it is probably one of the best representations of the future I've ever seen. No, I think almost everything he says there will happen. Almost everything, yes. I'll go out on a limb and say yes. He has extrapolated so well, that's why. I mean, okay, a baby might not be floating, fetal form may not be floating among the stars looking out on Earth. That's a different thing. Yeah, we are not alone. If you think that we are alone, we're being monumentally nitpicky or stupid. Within 20 or 30 years, Ray Kurzweil has already said so. And I think one state in the US, and I think it's Massachusetts, which usually does this, has already said, yeah, by 2050 you'll be able to marry robots. Marry robots? What are we talking about? It's going to be the most important thing. Singularity is what's going to happen. I mean, the sad part is we're not prepared for it because we're thinking in terms of the elections coming up and politics and economics. Singularity is going to overtake all this like a wave. Leap of degree in intelligence would be human and machine. That's very simple. And it's not a division. It's a continuum in which where the like dolphins are very intelligent. Magpies are very intelligent. New Caledonian crows use tools. Uh, Not just use tools, but fashion their own tools also. As inventions and things are happening on an exponential curve, it should happen within 30 years, between 20 to 40 years max, in that window. Luckily, I won't be around, but you probably have to think about what it means for you. Hey, that's a good question. But then there are a lot of people who told the Wright brothers that human beings weren't supposed to fly. If we were supposed to fly, God would have given us wings. So maybe you're making this heavier than air aircraft that you're trying to make. Maybe it should be put in back burner or cold storage. But I mean, with hindsight, who would agree with that?
Okay.
Human inventiveness continues, and in this case, unfortunately, it will continue till we reduce to making those who can remake us. When you ask me what is one of my favorite science fiction films, the reason I chose this, even though there are such a lot of other good ones also, why I chose this is that there's nothing I can add to this. He seems to have said it all, especially since it's not so much science fiction as science philosophy. Yeah, that's a better term for this. It's a metaphysical film. So 40 to 50 years from now, I mean, nothing would surprise me, let's put it that way. I once wrote that we should use the firefly enzyme, luciferase, to coat our roads so that we get the roads are lit up without using electricity. I wouldn't be surprised at all to find artificial meat, which would put vegetarians in a quandary because it would mean you can have meat without. I'm sorry if you're a vegetarian and I'm talking something that offends you, but I'm saying that when you get artificial non-vegetarian food, vegetarians can't feel offended, or some vegetarians can't feel offended because there's no life being taken for that food. At the same time, there's a lot of nutrients being available. So I wouldn't be at all surprised to find that kind of availability of meat. I also won't be surprised to find within 5 years, why 40 to 50 years, 5 years, the introduction of insects in our diet. We almost have insects. I mean, we have arthropods like prawns and crabs and all that. But insects are the next big thing that's going to happen. To solve the problems of the world, well, nutrition problems of the world at least. That's the next thing that's going to happen, I think. And I wouldn't be surprised to find cities going downwards, into the ground instead of upwards in skyscrapers. So, because of space constraints, like I imagine that would happen in Japan. Yeah, would it get claustrophobic? No, not with hologram. Oh, I wouldn't be surprised to find holograms either. Cinema halls where the action takes place in the middle, or where you project something as a 3D projection like Princess Leia in Star Wars. I wouldn't be surprised for that to happen, say, less than 20 years from now. So 40 to 50, I'm clearly out of my depths. It's singularity, I'll say more than that, transhumanity, where we become post-humans. And it will be, I think, through a melding of machine and man and woman, which would also probably mean doing away with gender, like Ursula Le Guin's Left Hand of Darkness, I think, a novel in which everyone was either a male or a female, could be anything they wanted at any time, depending on what they were feeling like. So post-human would be such a radical transformation from what we have thought of as being human, as to be utterly beyond our as to be magical, as you said, Arthur C. Clarke's. So advanced, so different, so alien, that only way you can describe it is magic. So what's going to happen in future? My only thought on that is, and there's just one common guy's thought, is that it's going to be only magical. That's the only word to describe it right now. Now, there are people in India who are willing to take this leap. And incidentally, when I talked about Satyajit Ray, you said it's very old, true. But did you know that the original story which he was going to do with Spielberg, which Spielberg's story about E.T. was not his idea. He had developed it. And I personally have in fact seen, because I used to know him, have seen his drawings, his storyboard drawings on what the alien should look like. But Hollywood at that time, not Bollywood, Hollywood at that time thought, nah, at the most he's an indie filmmaker, or at that time they never even called it indie. He's one of those arty filmmakers. He wouldn't know how to help in a blockbuster. And that's why the thing fell by the wayside. Depends on how they treat us. These intelligences that we are making, when they become far more intelligent than us, and they're the dominant species on Earth, depends on how they treat us. If they treat us nicely, it probably will be utopian. They'll look after us well, like we look after panthers well in good zoos. And if they think we're probably food or something like that, then it'll be dystopian. Even though I'm a confirmed total agnostic and science writer, I do a spiritual column for the Economic Times 3 times a week, because I differentiate between religion and spirituality. Because, frankly, I don't know if there's a God or not, but I do know there's goodness. And not very often, but on frequent occasions there's goodness. I think that you should read, not you should, who am I? I'm not saying that. If you've read a book called The Age of Spiritual Machines, again by Ray Kurzweil, you'll find that he touches upon the same subject, that will, for instance, these machines that we create, they're hardly machines anymore, these intelligences that we create, would they look upon us as creators, as godlike? Or as, yeah, these guys did it, yeah, but I mean, look at them, they're insects compared to us now. So, they might, spirituality is something that is an emergent phenomena, yeah, let's put it that way. You have to have consciousness and intelligence to be able to wonder. And if they are so intelligent and so much more intelligent than us, I'm sure they'll look up at the stars also and wonder. So I guess if that answers your question, would they be also spiritual?